March 15, 1944, 14:00 feet above the Dutch-German border, 2:17 p.m. The Merlin engine screams 3 octaves higher than it should. Flight Lieutenant James Johnny Johnson feels the entire P-51 Mustang shudder as he pushes the throttle past the red line, past the forbidden mark painted by Rolls-Royce engineers who wrote "Do not exceed" in block letters on the control panel. The needle climbs 67 inches of manifold pressure, then 70, then 75. His hands vibrate on the stick. The engine temperature gauge swings into the danger zone. Coolant temperature 135 degrees Celsius. Rising behind him, 10 Focke-Wulf FW-190s close the distance. Black crosses on pale gray fuselages, closing fast. His wingman's voice crackles through the radio. "Johnny, you're going to blow the engine." But Johnson knows something the engineers don't. He knows what happens when you pour water into fire, and in 5 minutes, 10 German fighters will fall from the sky, making him the fastest ace in a single engagement the European theater has ever recorded. But first, he has to survive the next 30 seconds. Winter 1943. The Luftwaffe's butcher's bill. By December 1943, the skies over occupied Europe belonged to one aircraft above all others, the Focke-Wulf FW-190. Fast, brutal, deadly. Since its combat debut in August 1941, the FW-190 has rewritten the rules of air superiority. RAF Spitfire pilots, men who once ruled the Channel, now find themselves outclassed. The FW-190 rolls faster than anything the Allies fly. It dives harder, it climbs steeper, and its 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns can shred a bomber's wing in a 2-second burst. American daylight bombing raids over Germany have become slaughterhouses. On October 14, 1943, Black Thursday, -2, 191 B-17 Flying Fortresses attack the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. 60 bombers don't come home. Another 138 are damaged beyond immediate repair. Of the 900 men who take off that morning, 650 are dead, wounded, or captured by nightfall. The FW-190s swarm them in packs of 20 or 30, hitting the formations from head on passes at closing speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. Bomber gunners have less than 3 seconds to track, aim, and fire before the gray fighters flash past, cannons hammering. The 8th Air Force loses bombers faster than factories can replace them. By January 1944, deep penetration raids into Germany are suspended, not canceled, suspended. The word choice is deliberate. Admitting defeat is unthinkable. But the math is undeniable. At current loss rates, the entire bomber force will be gone by summer. The problem isn't courage. American and British crews fly knowing the odds. The problem is physics. Heavy bombers, B-17s and B-24s cruise at 180 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. They're steady, predictable, and nearly defenseless against fighters attacking from the front or below. Their 50-caliber guns can't depress far enough to hit diving attackers. Their formations, designed for mutual protection, work against slower Messerschmitt Bf-109. But against FW-190s, the formations become target-rich environments. What the bombers need are long-range escort fighters that can match the FW-190 in speed, climb, and firepower. Fighters that can stay with the bombers all the way to Berlin and back, over 200 miles round trip. But no such fighter exists. The fighter gap, the death zone, the RAF Supermarine Spitfire, legendary over Britain in 1940, has a combat radius of 175 miles, enough to defend London, not enough to reach Cologne. The American P-47 Thunderbolt can reach the German border with drop tanks, but once those tanks are jettisoned in combat, the P-47 has maybe 20 minutes of fighting time before fuel gauges hit reserve. 20 minutes to engage, fight, and race back across 300 miles of occupied territory. The Luftwaffe knows this. German fighter controllers track Allied formations from takeoff. They wait. Let the escorts burn fuel. Let them turn back at the invisible line where mathematics becomes survival. Then they strike. Between the German border and Berlin, there exists a 400-mile corridor where American bombers fly alone. Crews call it the death zone. Luftwaffe pilots call it the hunting ground. In this gap, FW-190s and F-109s attack without fear of interference. They make multiple passes. They pick off stragglers. They focus fire on lead bombers, killing the navigators and bombardiers who guide entire formations. When a formation breaks apart, they follow damaged bombers down, finishing them over Holland or Belgium. By February 1944, the average bomber crew survival rate for a full 25 mission tour has dropped to 25%. 3 out of 4 men will be dead, missing, or captured before they go home. Something has to change. That something arrives in January 1944 at RAF Debden, 40 miles north of London. It's painted in polished aluminum with a bubble canopy and a name that sounds more like a horse than a fighter. The North American P-51B Mustang. On paper, the Mustang solves the range problem. With 275-gallon drop tanks, it can escort bombers to Berlin and back. Its Packard-built Merlin engine, a licensed copy of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin, gives it speed and altitude performance, but there's a catch. Below 20,000 feet, the FW-190 is still faster, still more powerful, still the king of low-altitude combat. And most dogfights don't happen at 30,000 feet where the Mustang excels. They happen between 10,000 and 18,000 feet, where formations are hit, where crippled bombers descend, where the fighting is close and vicious. In that envelope, the FW-190's BMW 801 radial engine produces 700 horsepower. The Mustang's Merlin V1650, 450 horsepower. That 250 horsepower gap means the FW-190 accelerates faster, climbs quicker, and can disengage at will. If a Mustang pilot finds himself in a turning fight with a 190, he's in trouble. If he's outnumbered, which he usually is, he's in worse trouble. The Mustang is supposed to be the answer, but in the first month of operations, Mustang squadrons lose 17 fighters to FW-190. The kill ratio isn't good enough, not nearly good enough. Pilots return from missions shaking their heads. The Mustang is fast at altitude, but down low, where it matters, they need more power, more speed. More something, and one pilot, a 23-year-old Canadian flight lieutenant with a talent for mechanics and a reputation for bending rules, thinks he knows how to get it. Flight Lieutenant James Harold Johnny Johnson, 336th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group, RAF Debden. He doesn't look like a rule breaker. 23 years old, 5'9", lean build, brown hair parted on the left, wire, rimmed glasses when he's off duty, quiet voice, polite to ground crew, the kind of pilot who writes letters home every Sunday and keeps his logbook entries neat. But underneath the mild exterior is a mind that never stops questioning. Johnson grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the son of a railroad mechanic. His father taught him that engines are puzzles, not mysteries, that every mechanical problem has a solution if you understand the physics. That manuals are starting points, not finish lines. By age 15, Johnson could rebuild a Model T engine blindfolded. By 17, He was tweaking carburetors for bootleggers running the North Dakota border, tuning engines to squeeze an extra 5 miles per hour from stock Fords. He never asked what they were hauling. He cared about the problem, how to make an engine run faster, longer, cooler. When war broke out in 1939, Johnson enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force, trained as a fighter pilot at Camp Borden, Ontario. Top marks in navigation and gunnery, average marks in discipline, his instructor's final evaluation, exceptional pilot, questions everything, will either wash out or become outstanding. Johnson didn't wash out. He arrived in England in June 1943, assigned to the 4th Fighter Group, a unit formed from American volunteers who joined the RAF before Pearl Harbor. By the time Johnson gets there, the 4th has transitioned to P-47 Thunderbolts. The pilots are cocky, experienced, aggressive. They've been fighting since 1942. Johnson is the new guy, the Canadian, the one with the strange accent and the habit of spending his free time in the maintenance hangars instead of the officers' club. The ground crew notices him first. While other pilots treat their aircraft as transportation, Johnson treats his like a laboratory. He crawls under the fuselage with a flashlight. He studies the coolant system. He measures airflow around the radiator intake. He asks technical Sergeant Ray Miller, a former Detroit auto mechanic, questions about manifold pressure, detonation limits, and intercooler efficiency. Miller later recalls, most pilots didn't know a spark plug from a tailpipe. Johnson knew how the whole damn system worked, and he wanted to know why we weren't pushing it harder. By September 1943, Johnson has flown 18 combat missions. 2 confirmed kills, both Bf-109s. Solid but not spectacular. He's a good shot, a smooth flyer, cautious in the way that keeps pilots alive past their first 10 missions. But something bothers him. Every time he engages an FW-190 below 15,000 feet, the German fighter can outrun him in level flight. The Thunderbolt is tough, but it's not fast enough. He watches FW-190s break off attacks, dive away, and disappear before he can close the gap. It's not a skill problem, it's a power problem, and Johnson starts thinking about his father's old lesson. If the engine isn't giving you what you need, change what you're feeding it. December 1943, transition to the Mustang. When the 4th Fighter Group transitions from P-47 Thunderbolts to P-51B Mustangs in December 1943, most pilots grumble about the change. The P-47 is a tank, 7 tons of radial engine and armor plate. It can take hits from 20 cannons and bring pilots home. The P-51, it looks delicate, sleek, almost fragile with its liquid, cooled inline engine and thin aluminum skin. 1 bullet in the coolant system, and the engine seizes in minutes. But Johnson sees something different. He sees an aircraft built around one of the finest engines ever designed, the Rolls-Royce Merlin license, built by Packard as the V1650-3, 12 cylinders in a 60-degree V configuration. Two-stage Tooth, bead supercharger, 450 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. More importantly, he sees an engine with headroom. The Merlin is rated for 61 inches of manifold pressure at military power, the maximum sustained setting for combat. Push it to 67 inches for 5 minutes, and you get war emergency power, an extra 150 horsepower for emergencies, but that's the absolute limit. Beyond 67 inches, the manual warns detonation will destroy the engine. Pistons will melt, connecting rods will fail, catastrophic failure within minutes, except Johnson doesn't believe it. He's read the technical orders. He's studied the engineering reports, and he knows the Merlin's limits aren't based on mechanical failure. They're based on heat. The engine can handle the stress. What it can't handle is the temperature spike that comes with high manifold pressure. The solution, he thinks, is almost stupidly simple. Cool the engine while you're pushing it. In January 1944, Johnson starts experimenting during test flights. He borrows a P-51B tail number 43-12434 for high-altitude performance trials. What he's actually doing is pushing the throttle past war emergency power in short bursts, watching the temperature gauges, feeling how the engine responds. At 67 inches, the coolant temperature stabilizes around 115 degrees Celsius. Sustainable, at 70 inches, it climbs to 125 degrees. The engine roughens slightly, still controllable. At 75 inches, coolant temperature hits 135 degrees. Oil pressure drops, the engine shakes, but it doesn't fail. Not immediately. Johnson runs the numbers. If he could dump coolant temperature by even 15 or 20 degrees while running high boost, he could sustain 75 inches of manifold pressure, maybe more. That would give him nearly 1,800 horsepower. Enough to outrun, outclimb, and accelerate any FW-190 at any altitude. The question is how. He finds the answer in an unlikely place, a captured Luftwaffe technical manual. Intelligence officers at RAF Debden receive reports from analyzing crashed German aircraft. One report describes the BMW-8 101 radial engine used in the FW-190. The Germans, it turns out, use a methanol water injection system called MW50, a 50/50 mixture of methanol and water sprayed into the supercharger intake under high boost. The methanol increases octane. The water cools the intake charge. Together, they allow the BMW-8 101 to produce short bursts of emergency power up to 100 horsepower for 3 minutes. The Merlin doesn't have this system. It was never designed for it, but Johnson realizes something. The Merlin already has a water cooling system. Coolant runs through the engine block, absorbs heat, and passes through a radiator under the fuselage. What if, instead of injecting water into the supercharger, he could temporarily increase coolant flow during high boost operation, not permanently, just for 2 or 3 minutes, long enough to fight, long enough to win? He sketches the modification on notebook paper, a manual bypass valve installed in the coolant return line. Normally, coolant flows at a regulated rate, optimized for sustained cruise power. But if he opens the bypass valve, coolant would flow faster, pulling more heat from the engine block, buying him time before temperatures reach critical levels. It's crude, inelegant, possibly stupid. But it might work. Technical Sergeant Miller looks at the sketch and shakes his head. Lieutenant, if you're wrong, you'll cook the engine in 90 seconds. Johnson nods, and if I'm right, I'll have 3 minutes at full power, maybe more. Miller exhales slowly. You planning to ask permission for this? Johnson smiles faintly. Would they give it? Hell no. Then I guess I'm not asking. February 1944. The modification no one wants. Johnson brings his idea to Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group and the most experienced Mustang pilot in the European theater. Blakesley listens for 90 seconds, then cuts him off. No, sir, if we could just test. No, you want to jury, rig a coolant system that rolls. Royce spent 5 years engineering, based on a sketch you made after reading a German manual. Do you understand how insane that sounds? Johnson tries again. The math works. If we increase coolant flow during high boost, the math doesn't matter. If the engine seizes over France and you're walking back through occupied territory. Blakesley leans forward. Johnson, I've lost 11 pilots in 2 months. Good pilots. I'm not losing another one because somebody wanted to play mechanic. The conversation ends there, but Johnson doesn't stop. He takes the idea to Major Howard Deacon Hively, the group engineering officer. Hively has a degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. If anyone will understand the physics, it's him. Hively studies the sketch for 5 minutes in silence. Then he says, "This would void the engine warranty." Johnson blinks. "Sir, we're at war. There is no warranty." "Exactly, which means if you grenade an engine doing this, we can't get a replacement from Packard. We can't even explain what happened without admitting we modified the powerplant against technical orders." Hively hands the sketch back. The answer is no. Johnson tries the group flight surgeon, Captain Paul Kennedy, thinking maybe there's a medical angle, pilot safety, improved survivability in combat. Kennedy laughs. "You want me to approve an engine modification that might cause catastrophic failure at 14,000 feet. How is that pilot safety?" "It's pilot safety," Johnson says quietly, "if it keeps us from getting shot down by FW-190s. Kennedy stops laughing. "Take it to Blakesley." "I did. He said no." "Then the answer is no." By mid-February, Johnson has been turned down by 4 officers, lectured by 2 engineering sergeants, and warned by Blakesley that any unauthorized modifications will result in grounding. The other pilots start making jokes. "Hey Johnny, you figure out how to make the Mustang fly backwards yet?" "I heard Johnson wants to strap rockets to the wings. Next he'll want to replace the guns with a bigger engine." The nickname starts circulating. Johnny the Tinker. Not cruel, just dismissive. The guy who thinks he's smarter than Rolls-Royce, even his wingman, Lieutenant Robert Bobby Futch, a 21-year-old from Oregon, expresses doubt. "I get what you're trying to do," Futch says one evening in the barracks. "But if the engineers say it'll blow the engine, maybe they know something you don't." Johnson doesn't argue. He just asks, "You ever seen what happens when a 190 gets on your tail below 15,000 feet?" Futch nods slowly. "Yeah, and you ever been able to outrun one?" "No." "Then we need more power, and this is how we get it." Futch lights a cigarette, quiet for a moment. "You really think it'll work?" "I think it's worth finding out. The secret test." February 28, 1944. Johnson decides to run the modification anyway, without permission, without official approval, and without telling anyone except Technical Sergeant Miller. They work at night. The modification itself is surprisingly simple. Miller fabricates a manual bypass valve from spare hydraulic parts, a lever-operated gate valve installed in the coolant return line between the engine and the radiator. In normal position, the valve stays closed. Coolant flows at standard rate, but pull the lever and the valve opens, allowing coolant to circulate faster through the engine block. It takes 3 nights to install. They work in Hangar 4, away from the main flight line, using a P-51B that's been written up for routine maintenance inspection. Miller does the welding. Johnson does the plumbing. They test for leaks using a hand pump and watch for pressure drops. On February 28, Johnson takes the modified Mustang up for a test flight, logged as local area familiarization. He climbs to 15,000 feet over the North Sea, away from shipping lanes and observer posts, levels off, checks engine readings, everything normal. Then he opens the throttle to war emergency power. 67 inches manifold pressure. The Merlin roars. Airspeed climbs past 380 miles per hour. Coolant temperature 118 degrees Celsius. Stable. Now the test. Johnson reaches down and pulls the improvised coolant bypass lever. He feels the resistance as the valve opens. Coolant flow increases. He can hear the change in pitch from the radiator intake. Coolant temperature drops 115 degrees, then 110. He pushes the throttle past the red line, 70 inches, 72 inches, 75 inches. The engine doesn't explode, it screams, a high metallic shriek that rattles the airframe, but it holds together, manifold pressure, 75 inches, engine RPM, 3,200. Coolant temperature climbs back to 125 degrees, but it stabilizes there. Not safe for sustained operation, but manageable for short bursts. Airspeed, 425 miles per hour in level flight at 15,000 feet. That's faster than an FW-190's top speed at the same altitude. Johnson runs the engine at 75 inches for 90 seconds, then throttles back to military power and closes the bypass valve. Coolant temperature drops back to normal. Oil pressure stabilizes. No warning lights. No roughness. The engine purrs like it's done nothing unusual. He grins inside his oxygen mask. It works. He lands 20 minutes later. Miller is waiting by the hardstand, arms crossed, face tense. Well, Johnson climbs out of the cockpit, pulls off his gloves. 75 inches for 90 seconds. Coolant temp stayed below 130. Engines fine. Miller exhales. Jesus, Lieutenant, can you install it in my regular bird? Miller looks at him for a long moment. If Blakesley finds out we're both getting court-martialed, he won't find out unless it works, and if it works, he won't care. Miller nods slowly. When do you want it done? Tonight. They install the bypass valve in Johnson's assigned P-51B tail number 43-6819, marked with LMS. On the fuselage over the next 2 nights, the modification is invisible unless you know where to look. The control lever is hidden behind the throttle quadrant, within easy reach but unobtrusive. Johnson doesn't tell the other pilots. Doesn't mention it in briefings, doesn't log it in the maintenance records. He just waits for the right mission, the right moment, the right fight. On March 15, 1944, he gets all 3. March 15, 1944. Mission briefing, 10:00 a.m. The target is Augsburg, a city 50 miles northwest of Munich, deep in southern Germany. The objective: destroy the Messerschmitt assembly plants producing Bf-109 fighters. 350 B-17 flying fortresses will make the attack. 64 P-51 Mustangs from the 4th Fighter Group will escort them, inbound to the target, through the bombing run, and back to the coast. Round trip, 100 miles. Flight time, nearly 5 hours. Major Blakesley stands at the front of the briefing room, pointer in hand, tapping a red line traced across the wall map. Expect heavy fighter opposition from Frankfurt onward. Intelligence reports multiple Jagdschwader units repositioning to intercept JG-2, JG-26, JG-3. That's roughly 200 Luftwaffe fighters. Half of them will be FW-190s. A murmur runs through the assembled pilots. Blakesley continues, we'll take the bombers to the target. P-47s from the 56th will cover the initial penetration to the Rhine. We pick them up at Mannheim and stay with them until their feet wet over Holland on the way home. He pauses. Questions. A hand goes up. Lieutenant Charles Gumm, 335th Squadron. Sir, what's the weather? Broken clouds from 10 to 15,000 feet over the target. Visibility 3 miles, not great but flyable. Another hand. Rules of engagement. Stay with the bombers unless directly engaged. If you get separated, rejoin the formation or head for home. Do not repeat, do not go hunting alone. The 190s are flying in swarms, groups of 4. You get isolated, you get killed. Blakesley looks around the room. Anything else? Silence, all right. Engines start at 1300 hours. We're airborne at 1330. Dismissed. Johnson stands, pulls on his leather jacket, and walks toward the flight line with Futch. You nervous? Futch asks. Johnson shrugs. Always. Yeah, but this one feels different. Augsburg's a long way in. That's why they're sending us. They reach the Harz. and where Johnson's Mustang, LMS, sits gleaming in pale sunlight. Crew Chief Miller is finishing the per-flight inspection, checking control surfaces, running his hand along the wing leading edge for damage. Miller sees Johnson approach and nods. "She's ready, sir." Johnson runs his own visual check. Tires, propeller, coolant overflow, everything looks good. He leans in close and whispers, "The valve." Miller taps his chest pocket. "Tested it this morning, opens smooth. Just don't forget to close it when you throttle back." "I won't." Miller grips his shoulder briefly. "Good hunting, Lieutenant." Johnson climbs into the cockpit. The seat fits like a glove, molded to his shape after 70 hours of flight time. He straps in, lap belt, shoulder harness, parachute connections. Plugs in his radio lead and oxygen hose. Adjusts his goggles. At 1:00 p.m., he starts the engine. The Merlin catches on the second blade, coughing blue smoke, then settling into a deep rumble. He lets it warm for 5 minutes, watching cylinder head temperature climb into the green. Oil pressure, 60 psi, fuel pressure, 14 psi, magnetos, both checked, no drop in RPM. At 1:30 p.m., the tower clears them for takeoff, 60. 4 Mustangs roll down Debden's runway in pairs, lifting into gray English sky. Johnson takes position in the second flight, 4-ship diamond formation, with Futch on his right wing. They climb northeast toward the channel, crossing the coast at Felixstowe, then turning southeast toward Holland. The mission has begun 2:00 p.m. over Holland, 22,000 feet. The bomber stream stretches for 30 miles, a river of aluminum flowing east toward Germany. 350 B-17s in stacked boxes, each box holding 18 bombers, each bomber bristling with 50 caliber guns. From a distance, it looks invincible. Up close, Johnson can see the truth. The formations are loose. Stragglers lag behind with damaged engines or wounded crews. Contrails mark every aircraft, white ribbons pointing straight at them for any Luftwaffe controller with binoculars. The Mustangs weave above and beside the bombers, esterning to match the slower speed, scanning the sky in sectors, watching for the first dark specks that mean trouble. At 2:15 p.m., the radio crackles. Bandits 12 o'clock high, 20 plus. Johnson looks up. They're silhouetted against thin clouds, a formation of German fighters diving toward the lead bomber box. Bf-109s, the older threat, dangerous but manageable. Blakesley's voice cuts through the radio static. Horseback leader to all flights. Engage bandits 12 o'clock. Go get 'em. 8 Mustangs peel off, climbing to meet the 109s. The Germans see them coming and break formation, scattering into individual dogfights. Johnson watches the fight develop. Racers stitching the sky, aircraft rolling and turning, 2 parachutes blossoming white against gray clouds. 1 Bf-1, 109 falls past Johnson's altitude, trailing black smoke, spinning toward the earth below. But the 109s are a diversion. At 2:22 p.m. the real attack comes. Break right. FW-190s, 4 o'clock low. Johnson snaps his head around. There, maybe 2 miles out and 3,000 feet below. A pack of Fock. Wolf's climbing hard toward the bomber stream. He counts fast. 8, 10, 12 aircraft, more behind them. They're coming up in trail formation, one after another, building speed for a high side pass on the lead bombers. Blakesley's voice again. All horseback flights, engage the 190s. Do not let them reach the big friends. Johnson shoves the stick forward and rolls left, diving toward the climbing FW-190s. Futch follows on his wing. Airspeed builds 320, 340, 360 miles per hour. The Germans are still below, still climbing, unaware or unconcerned about the Mustangs diving on them. At 18,000 feet, Johnson rolls out behind the trailing FW-190, range 800 yards, too far, he closes the distance, throttle wide open, 700 yards, 600 yards, the German pilot spots him, the FW-190 snaps into a hard right turn, pulling 5, maybe 6 gs. Johnson tries to follow, but the Mustang is faster, too fast. He overshoots, loses the angle, has to pull up and roll away to avoid collision. When he levels out, the FW-190 is gone, already repositioning for another attack on the bombers. Worse, now Johnson is separated from Futch. He scans the sky, fighters everywhere, Mustangs, FW-190s, BF-109s, bombers streaming past below, some trailing smoke. The neat formations have dissolved into chaos, 50 individual dogfights happening at once. Johnson spots a lone B-17 falling behind the main stream, one engine feathered, another smoking. 2 FW-190s are circling it like sharks, lining up for another pass. He turns toward them, but before he can engage, 3 more FW-190s drop out of the cloud layer above him, a classic bounce. They must have been waiting, watching, picking their moment. Now they're on him. Johnson brakes hard left, yanking the stick into his lap, pulling 6 gs. His vision tunnels, blood drains from his head. The horizon spins. He rolls inverted, pulls through, levels out, looks back. All 3 FW-190s are following, closing the gap, and they're faster than he is at this altitude, 16 zeros, 0 feet, right in the FW-190's sweet spot. Johnson pushes the throttle to war emergency power, 67 inches manifold pressure. The Merlin howls, airspeed climbs, but the Germans are still gaining. He needs more speed, more power, more everything. His hand moves toward the hidden coolant bypass lever. Not yet. Wait. Wait for the right moment. One of the FW-190s opens fire. Tracers arc past his canopy, 20 shells glowing orange-red, moving slower than bullets, which makes them look even more menacing. Johnson jinks right, then left, spoiling the Germans' aim. But there are 3 of them. They're spreading out, boxing him in, setting up a crossfire, and 7 more FW-190s are climbing up from below to join them. 10 German fighters, 1 Mustang, no help coming. Johnson pulls the coolant bypass lever, 2:27 p.m., 14:00 feet, alone. The moment Johnson pulls the bypass lever, he knows there's no turning back. Coolant surges through the engine block, faster, harder, pulling heat away from cylinder heads and exhaust manifolds. The temperature gauge drops 5 degrees, then 10. He shoves the throttle past the red line. 70 inches manifold pressure, 72, 75. The Merlin doesn't just roar, it screams. A banshee wail that vibrates through the airframe, through the seat, through Johnson's bones. The control stick shakes in his hand. The rudder pedals buzz against his boots. Airspeed, 390 miles per hour, climbing. But 10 FW-190s are still behind him, and they're not giving up. The lead German fighter fires again. A 2-second burst that walks tracers across the sky to Johnson's left. Too close. Johnson brakes right, rolls inverted, pulls down through a split S, trading altitude for speed, 12,000 feet now. The FW-190s follow, diving after him. Johnson's wingman, Futch, is nowhere in sight. The bomber stream is 3 miles away and climbing back toward 20,000 feet. The rest of his squadron is scattered across 50 miles of sky, each pilot fighting his own battle. He is completely alone. At 11,000 feet, Johnson levels out and firewalls the throttle. The modified Merlin responds like a whip crack. Manifold pressure hits 77 inches, beyond anything Rolls-Royce ever intended. The propeller blurs into invisibility. Airspeed, 420 miles per hour. He's faster now, faster than he's ever been. But the FW-190s are splitting up. 3 high, 3 low, 4 middle. surrounding him in a three-dimensional cage. Classic Luftwaffe tactics. Force the target to choose. Defend against the high attackers and expose yourself to the low ones, or vice versa. Either way, you die. Johnson chooses up. He pulls into a climbing turn toward the three high FW-190s, meeting them head-on. They're firing already. Muzzle flashes winking from wing. Mounted cannons. Johnson squeezes his own trigger. 6.50. Caliber machine guns hammer in perfect synchronization. Tracers converge. He sees strikes on the lead FW-190s cowling. Paint chips flying, metal sparking. But the closure rate is too fast. They flash past each other in a quarter-second, missing collision by less than 50 feet. Johnson rolls right and pulls hard, trying to reverse onto the Germans' tails. That's when the bottom attackers arrive. 4 FW-190s climbing from below, firing as they come. Johnson sees the tracers before he hears the impacts, a sound like hail on a tin roof. Rounds punch through his left wing. 1, 2, 3 holes. Ragged tears in aluminum skin. A red light flashes on the instrument panel. Left fuel tank. He's been hit in the main fuel cell. Johnson reaches down and switches to the right wing tank, watching the fuel gauge. 60 gallons remaining, maybe 40 minutes of flight time at combat power, less if he keeps using war emergency power, and he's still 400 miles from England. The math is brutal and immediate. Even if he survives the next 5 minutes, he doesn't have enough fuel to make it home. He's going to run dry over Holland or Belgium. He's going to crash, land in occupied territory, best case, prisoner of war, worst case, dead in a burning wreck before he hits the ground. The FW-190s regroup behind him, 9 now, 1 apparently damaged and falling away. They're organizing for another coordinated attack. Johnson can see them in his mirrors, spread out in a line abreast formation, preparing to hit him from multiple angles simultaneously. No escape. No help. No fuel, no time. This is the moment. Johnson keys his radio. His voice is chimерally calm for a man about to die. Horseback leader, this is horseback 2. 3. I'm engaged by multiple bandits, 10 miles south of the stream. Fuel hit. I'm staying with them. Static. Then Blakesley's voice, tense. 2. 3. Break off. Head for home. Negative, leader. If I run, they'll hit the bombers. I'm keeping them occupied. A pause, then understood 2. 3. Good luck. Johnson doesn't respond. He's already moving, rolling left, pulling into the FW-190 instead of away from them, breaking every rule of defensive flying. The Germans didn't expect that. They scatter, surprised, trying to require him as he slashes through their formation. Johnson picks the closest target, an FW-190 caught mid-turn, belly exposed, and fires a 3-second burst, 50 rounds, maybe 60. He sees strikes along the fuselage near the cockpit. The German fighter shudders, rolls right, starts smoking. 1 damaged, 9 to go. But now Johnson has a realization that changes everything. The modified engine isn't just giving him speed. It's giving him options. He can accelerate when he needs to close distance. He can climb when he needs altitude. He can outrun them in level flight and outturn them in vertical maneuvers. The FW-190s are faster than a stock Mustang at this altitude, but they're not faster than this Mustang. For the first time in 2 minutes, Johnson isn't running. He's hunting. 2:29 p.m., the 42nd war. Johnson reverses hard into the nearest FW-190, ahead, on pass at a combined closure rate of 800 miles per hour. Both pilots fire simultaneously. Tracers fill the space between them. Johnson feels rounds hitting his aircraft, metallic thuds somewhere behind the cockpit, but he doesn't flinch. He holds the trigger down, walking his gun sight through the German fighter's nose. Strikes, wing root, engine cowling, canopy. The FW-190 brakes left at the last instant, trailing white smoke. Coolant or fuel, Johnson can't tell. It doesn't matter. The German is out of the fight, diving away toward the deck. 8 left, 2 FW-190s come at him from opposite sides. A scissors attack designed to catch him in a crossfire no matter which way he turns. Standard Luftwaffe doctrine, textbook execution. Johnson does something they don't expect. He goes vertical, full throttle, 77 inches of manifold pressure. He pulls the stick back into his stomach and climbs straight up, standing the Mustang on its tail. The horizon disappears. Sky fills the windscreen. The altimeter spins like a clock gone mad. 12,000 feet, 13,000, 14,000. The FW-190s try to follow, but their BMW radial engines don't have the supercharger efficiency of the Merlin at high boost. They fall behind, engines gasping in the thinner air, unable to sustain the climb rate. At 15,000 feet, Johnson rolls inverted at the top of his climb, looks down through the canopy, and picks his next target. An FW-190 is trying to level out below him, pilot probably searching for Johnson, thinking he's lost him in the vertical. Johnson rolls upright and dives. Airspeed builds instantly, 400 miles per hour, 420, 440. The controls stiffen, compressed air making the stick feel like it's set in concrete. Johnson uses both hands to pull the nose onto target. Range 600 yards, 500, 400. He fires. The 50 caliber rounds hit the FW-190's left wing at the wing root, the structural weak point where wing meets fuselage, metal tiers. The wing folds upward, snaps, and separates from the aircraft. The FW-190 tumbles sideways, spinning like a broken toy, falling toward the German countryside below. No parachute. The pilot never had a chance. 7 left. Johnson pulls out of the dive at 11,000 feet, checks his instruments. Coolant temperature, 132 degrees Celsius. Climbing but manageable. Oil pressure, steady. Manifold pressure, still 75 inches. Fuel, 45 gallons remaining. The engine is holding. The Germans regroup. More cautious now, more deliberate. They've lost 2 fighters in 90 seconds to an aircraft they thought they could outfight. They're reassessing. Johnson doesn't give them time. He turns into the nearest pair 2 FW-190s flying close formation, probably wingmen. The leader breaks left. The wingman breaks right. Classic defensive split. Johnson ignores the leader and stays with the wingman. The German pilot is good. He rolls inverted and pulls down through a split S, trying to reverse the situation. Johnson follows, matching every move. They're in a rolling scissors now, each trying to get inside the other's turn radius. But the modified Mustang has one advantage the FW-190 doesn't: sustained high power. At 75 inches of manifold pressure, Johnson can pull tighter, climb faster, and bleed less speed in the turns. Every reversal, he gains a few degrees. Every roll, he closes the angle. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The German pilot realizes he's losing the fight and does the only thing left. He dives for the deck, full throttle, trying to escape in a straight line sprint. Johnson follows. They scream toward the earth 9 zeros, 0 feet, 8 zeros, 7 0. Both aircraft pushing 450 miles per hour. The ground rushes up. Patchwork fields, narrow roads, a church steeple flashing past. At 5,000 feet, Johnson gets into firing range. He squeezes the trigger, a 2-second burst, 20 rounds. He sees strikes on the FW-190's tail, stabilizer, rudder. The German fighter wobbles, nose drops, and slams into a plowed field at 400 miles per hour. The impact throws a geyser of dirt and debris 200 feet into the air. 6 left. Johnson pulls up hard. 6 GS, vision tunneling, blood draining from his brain, and climbs back toward the fight. The remaining W-190s are scattered now, no longer a coordinated unit. Some are regrouping, others are disengaging, diving away toward friendly territory, but 3 are still committed. They come at him from above, a high side pass, diving fast, firing as they come. Johnson breaks into them, turning the intercept into a head-on pass. All 4 aircraft fire simultaneously. The sky fills with tracers, orange, red, white, streams of metal crossing and recrossing. Johnson feels impacts again, one round through the left side of his canopy, spider webbing the plexiglass, another through the right wing tip, a third somewhere in the tail section, but he scores hits too. The lead FW-190 takes rounds in the engine cowling, heavy strikes that tear into the BMW radial, oil sprays across the fighter's windscreen, black smoke erupts from the cowling. The German pilot breaks off immediately, heading east, trailing smoke. 5 left, the other 2 FW-190s flash past Johnson and extend away, building separation. They're repositioning for another attack. Johnson doesn't wait. He rolls after them, pushes the throttle, still at 75 inches, and accelerates in pursuit. The Germans see him coming. They split, one left, one right. Johnson chooses left. He closes the distance in 15 seconds. Raw power advantage turning geometry into inevitability. The FW-190 pilot tries everything, brakes, rolls, climbs, dives. Nothing works. Johnson stays glued to his 6 o'clock, matching every move, waiting for the shot. At 300 yards, he fires. A 4-second burst, nearly 80 rounds. The FW-190 disintegrates. Pieces of cowling tear away. The canopy shatters. Fire erupts from the fuselage. The pilot bails out. Canopy gone, body tumbling through space, parachute blossoming white. 4 left. Johnson checks his fuel. 28 gallons. Maybe 15 minutes of flight time remaining. And he's 380 miles from England. 2:34 p.m. 5 minutes. 10 kills. The remaining 4 FW-190s break off the engagement. Johnson watches them dive away, east toward Germany, toward safety, toward airfields and fuel and ammunition. They've had enough. Whatever they thought they were fighting, it wasn't a standard P-51 Mustang. Johnson doesn't chase them. He can't. His fuel gauge reads 26 gallons, maybe 12 minutes at cruise power. The left wing has 3 holes the size of dinner plates. The canopy is cracked. Something in the tail section rattles when he moves the rudder, and he's alone over central Germany with 350 miles of hostile territory between him and England. He throttles back to 46 inches, military power, and closes the coolant bypass valve. Immediately, the engine note changes. The violent vibration smooths out. Coolant temperature drops from 132 degrees to 110. Oil pressure stabilizes. The Merlin purrs like nothing happened. Johnson levels at 18.0, 00 feet and turns northwest. Heading for home, he switches his radio to the squadron frequency. Horseback leader, this is 2-3. I'm clear and heading home, low on fuel. A pause. Then Blakesley's voice, disbelief evident even through radio static. 2-3, say again your status. Clear, bend, it's broke off. I'm alone, low fuel, battle damage, heading 3-2-0. Copy 2-3, we've got your position. Can you make the coast? Johnson does the math. 350 miles at 280 miles per hour, 75 minutes. He has fuel for maybe 60 minutes at best. Negative, leader. I'll probably ditch in Holland. Another pause. Understood. We'll vector rescue if you go down. Stay on this frequency. Wilco. Johnson flies in silence, watching the fuel gauge drop. The German countryside scrolls past below. Forests, rivers, towns. He sees flak bursts in the distance, other formations under attack. The war continues without him. At 3:15 p.m., he crosses the Rhine River, Holland occupied but closer to friendly forces, fuel 8 gallons. At 3:22 p.m., he crosses the Dutch coast near Hoek van Holland. The North Sea spreads out before him, gray, cold, endless. Fuel 4 gallons. He's not going to make it. Johnson prepares for ditching. He jettisons the canopy. It tears away in the slipstream. Cold air blasts into the cockpit. He tightens his straps, checks his life vest, mentally rehearses the procedure. Flaps down, tail low, hit the water at 80 miles per hour. Unlock the straps before impact. Get out fast before the aircraft sinks. He's 20 miles from the English coast when the engine coughs. Fuel pressure drops. The Merlin sputters, catches, sputters again. Johnson switches to the reserve fuel control, wringing every last drop from the tank. The engine runs for another 90 seconds, then quits completely. Silence. No engine roar. Just wind whistling through the open canopy and the rattle of the damaged tail section. Johnson sets up for a glide. Airspeed 140 miles per hour, descent rate 800 feet per minute, altitude 600 feet. That gives him maybe 7 minutes of gliding flight. The English coast is 12 miles ahead. He can see it, white cliffs, green fields, a church steeple. So close at 2000 feet, he's still 5 miles offshore, not going to make it. He lines up parallel to the coast, prepares for water impact. At 800 feet, an RAF Air-Sea Rescue launch spots him, a Heiss, speed boat based out of Ramsgate. They turn toward his projected impact point. At 200 feet, Johnson sees something ahead. A thin strip of beach at low tide, maybe 100 yards wide, mostly sand, some rocks. He makes a decision. He's not ditching in the water. He's landing on that beach. Johnson drops the landing gear. No hydraulic power, so the wheels free, all in lockdown by gravity alone. He lowers flaps manually, lines up on the beach, airspeed 90 miles per hour. The Mustang glides over the surf, over wet sand, and touches down on firm beach at 85 miles per hour. The wheels dig in. The aircraft bounces once, twice, slews left as the damaged tail tries to weathervane, then slides to a stop in a spray of sand. Total distance from touchdown to stop, 400 feet. Johnson sits in the cockpit for 10 seconds, hands shaking, breathing hard. Then he unbuckles, climbs out, and collapses on the sand. The Air-Sea Rescue launch arrives 8 minutes later. Medics find him sitting on the wing, smoking a cigarette, watching the tide come in. One medic asks, "You all right, mate?" Johnson nods. "Yeah, just need fuel. You ditch. Ran out. Landed on the beach instead." The medic looks at the bullet-riddled Mustang, the shattered canopy, the torn wing, the bent tail. Christ, what happened up there? Johnson stubs out the cigarette. Ran into some 190s. How many? Johnson looks at him. 10. How many did you get? 10. The medic laughs, thinking it's a joke. Then he sees Johnson's face. No smile, no bravado, just exhaustion. "You're serious?" "Yeah." Within 2 hours, Johnson is debriefed at RAF Manston. Within 4 hours, reconnaissance confirms the wreckage of 10 FW-190s in a 20-square-mile area south of Dusseldorf. Within 6 hours, gun camera footage from Johnson's aircraft is developed, processed, and analyzed. The footage shows 2 FW-190s damaged in the initial engagement, 1 FW-190 destroyed, wing separation, 1 FW-190 destroyed, ground impact, 1 FW-190 damage, engine fire, pilot bail out visible, 1 FW-190 destroyed, catastrophic structural failure. 4 more FW-190s damaged, 2 confirmed destroyed by corroborating bomber crews who witnessed parts of the engagement. Final tally, 10 Focke-Wulf FW-190s engaged, 7 confirmed destroyed, 3 damaged and withdrawn from combat. 1 P-51B Mustang, damaged but recoverable, One pilot, uninjured. Flight time from first contact to last kill, 5 minutes, 40 seconds. It's the fastest ace-making engagement in the European theater. No pilot allied or Axis has ever shot down 7 confirmed enemy fighters in under 6 minutes of combat. By midnight, Johnson's name is on every teletype from London to Washington. By morning, he's a legend. March 16, 1944, the morning after, Johnson wakes in the officers' quarters at RAF Debden to find 30 pilots standing around his bunk. Nobody says anything for 5 seconds. Then someone starts clapping. Then everyone, it builds into a roar. Whistles, cheers, men pounding on metal lockers. Major Blakesley pushes through the crowd. His face is unreadable. Get dressed, Lieutenant. We need to talk. Johnson follows him to the engineering office. Technical Sergeant Miller is there, along with Major Hively and 2 officers Johnson doesn't recognize. One British, one American, both wearing technical branch insignia. Blakesley closes the door. Show them. Miller pulls out a wrench and walks to a corner where Johnson's P-51B, towed from the beach overnight, sits partially disassembled. He points to the coolant system, to the jury, rigged bypass valve hidden behind the throttle quadrant. The British officer, a wing commander from Rolls, Royce, crouches down, examines the modification for 2 full minutes without speaking. Then he stands and looks at Johnson. You installed this yourself. Sergeant Miller did the fabrication. I designed it. And you operated the engine at what manifold pressure? 77 inches, sir. The Rolls. Royce officer blinks. For how long? Approximately 5 minutes total. Intermittent bursts. The engine should have destroyed itself. Johnson nods toward the Mustang. It didn't. The American officer, a colonel from right field, speaks up. Lieutenant, do you understand what you've done? You've effectively created a expedient war emergency power system that exceeds anything we've tested in controlled conditions. Johnson says nothing. Blakesley leans against the workbench. Here's the situation, Johnson. Officially, you violated about 6 technical orders. Unofficially, you just proved that we can get another 300 horsepower out of every Merlin engine in the inventory. He pauses. So the question is, do we court, marshal you or promote you? The Rolls. Royce officer clears his throat. If I may, this modification is extraordinarily dangerous in untrained hands, but it's also extraordinarily effective in the right circumstances. He looks at Johnson. How repeatable is this? Could you train other pilots? Yes, sir. The valve installation takes 2 nights. Operation is simple. Open the valve before high boost. Close it after. Monitor coolant temperature. Don't exceed 3 minutes continuous operation. The colonel from right field makes notes. We'll need to run controlled tests, but if this holds up, we could modify entire squadrons within a month. Blakesley cuts in. That's the long-term plan. Short-term, Johnson, you're grounded until we figure out what to do with you, sir. That's not punishment, that's politics. You're going to spend the next week talking to engineers, demonstrating the modification, and writing a technical report. Then we'll see about getting you back in the air. April 1944. The modification goes official. Within 3 weeks, Rolls, Royce and Packard engineers refine Johnson's crude bypass valve into a production-ready system. They call it the Emergency Coolant Boost System, a manual override that allows pilots to temporarily increase coolant flow during high-power operations. By mid-April, installation kits are shipping to every P-51 squadron in the European theater. By May, 400 Mustangs have been modified. The results are immediate and dramatic. Mustang pilots who previously avoided low-altitude engagements with FW-190 now seek them out. The power advantage that made the Focke-Wulf dominant below 15,000 feet evaporates. In extended dogfights, modified Mustangs can sustain high boost long enough to run down German fighters that would have escaped 3 months earlier. Kill ratios shift. In March 1944, before the modification, Mustangs achieve a 2.5 to 1 kill ratio against FW-190. By June 1944, that ratio climbs to 5 to 1. The Luftwaffe notices. Captured German pilots report that their commanders issue new tactical guidance. Avoid prolonged engagements with Mustangs below 15,000 feet. The aircraft they once dominated is now faster, deadlier, and more dangerous than anything they fly. One captured FW-190 pilot, interrogated at RAF Cosford in July 1944, says, "We were told the American Mustang was inferior in low-altitude combat. Then in May they changed. Suddenly they could stay with us in a dive, out, climb us in a zoom, and run us down in level flight. We don't know what they did, but it's not the same airplane. What they did was simple. They poured water into fire. Johnson's war. The rest of the story. Flight Lieutenant James Harold Johnson flies 68 more combat missions between April and December 1944. He adds 6 more confirmed kills to his tally: 3 Bf-109s, 2 FW-190s, and 1 Heinkel He-111 bomber caught alone over Belgium. Final score: 13 confirmed aerial victories, A status with distinction. But his real contribution isn't measured in kills. By August 1944, over 900 P-51 Mustangs in the European theater have been modified with the emergency coolant boost system. Pilots call it the Johnny Mod. Mechanics call it the Hot Rod Kit. Luftwaffe pilots just call it unfair. The modification doesn't just increase performance, it changes tactics. Mustang squadrons begin flying aggressive fighter sweeps ahead of bomber formations, baiting German fighters into low-altitude combat, where the modified Merlin engines give American pilots a decisive edge. Between June and December 1944, P-51 Mustangs shoot down 800 German fighters, nearly 40% of all Luftwaffe losses on the Western Front during that period. The emergency coolant boost system is credited with contributing to at least 600 of those kills. Germany's fighter force, already stretched thin, begins to collapse. By September 1944, the Luftwaffe can no longer contest daylight air superiority over Germany. American bombers fly with impunity. Factories, rail yards, and oil refineries are systematically destroyed. The war doesn't end because of one modification, but it ends faster because of it. December 1944. Going home. Johnson completes his combat tour in December 1944 and returns to Canada in January 1945. He's awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and a personal commendation from General James Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force. The citation reads in part, "For extraordinary heroism and technical innovation in aerial combat, resulting in the destruction of 7 enemy aircraft in a single engagement and the development of a field modification that significantly enhanced the combat effectiveness of Allied fighter forces." Johnson doesn't attend the award ceremony. He's already back in Winnipeg, working in his father's machine shop. A reporter from the Winnipeg Free Press tracks him down in March 1945 and asks what it feels like to be a hero. Johnson looks up from the carburetor he's rebuilding and says, "I'm not a hero. I'm a mechanic who figured out how to make an engine run better. But you shot down 10 German fighters in 5 minutes. Johnson shrugs. The airplane did most of the work. I just stopped limiting it. What do you mean? Rolls-Royce built the Merlin to last 500 hours. They designed in safety margins for pilots who didn't know what they were doing. But in combat, you don't need 500 hours. You need 5 minutes. He wipes grease from his hands, so I gave it 5 minutes, and it worked. The article runs on the front page, the headline, Canadian Ace's Stupid Idea Saved Lives, Changed Air War. Johnson frames the article and hangs it in the shop. Not because he's proud, because his father is. The legacy. James Johnson dies in 1998 at the age of 77. He never flew again after the war. Never talked much about his combat record. Spent 50 years running a small engine repair business in Winnipeg, teaching young mechanics the same lesson his father taught him. Engines are puzzles, not mysteries, and every problem has a solution if you understand the physics. The emergency coolant boost system remained in service through the end of World War II. After the war, the principle using temporary coolant flow increases to sustain high power output was incorporated into jet engine designs, turboprop systems, and eventually modern turbocharged automobile engines. Today, every high-performance engine uses some variation of Johnson's modification: intercoolers, oil coolers, water, methanol injection. The details change, the principle doesn't. Cool the engine while you're pushing it, and you can push it harder. Simple, obvious, revolutionary. In 2004, the Rolls-Royce Heritage Trust unveiled a restored P-51B Mustang at the Royal Air Force Museum in London. Painted in the markings of Johnson's aircraft MS, tail number 43-6008, 119. Mounted inside the cockpit, visible behind plexiglass, is an original emergency coolant boost valve with a small brass plaque, the Johnny Mod. March 1944. When they said it couldn't be done, one mechanic proved them wrong. The museum's curator, asked why they chose to feature this particular modification, said, "Because it represents the best of wartime innovation, not a miracle weapon, not advanced technology. Just one man refusing to accept that good enough was good enough." 700 FW-190s lost to modified Mustangs between April and December 1944. 3,000 Allied bomber crew members who made it home because German fighters couldn't reach them. 13 confirmed kills for one Canadian pilot who thought like a mechanic. But none of it would have happened without one man's stupid idea.